How's it going, everybody? My name is Jason. I'll be your host on this CFL talk show, Hussey's Huddle. In this video, I am going to talk to you today about my personal top 10 free agents list for this coming offseason, which starts in about a week and a half. So I'm really excited for the ball to get rolling, some players to sign with new teams, and really excited to talk about some CFL football with you. But quickly, before we get started, if you want to support the channel, the best way to do it is by hitting that like button and subscribing to Hussey's Huddle for more CFL content just like this. With that said, let's get into today's list. So originally I wasn't going to release a top 10 just because they're usually pretty unoriginal and it's just something that everybody kind of releases. But then I saw the CFL.ca release their top 30 pending free agents for this offseason. And I just had some major disagreements with where some players were placed. And so I was like, all right, I'm doing this. I'm going to be releasing my own top 10. So without further ado, let's get into it. So at number 1, I have wide receiver Brian Burnham of the BC Lions. And Burnham, I would say, along with Shaq Evans and Brandon Banks, are the 3 receivers that are in the conversation for the best receiver in the CFL. At least the last time we saw the league play in 2019. He just has an all-around skill set. He has the best hands in the league. He may not be the most explosive player in the league, but he can get deep. He can attack all areas of the field. And in a perimeter league like the CFL, Burnham is just so important to teams. And with him being the best receiver available in free agency, he is my number 1 target this offseason. And number 2, this is something you need to understand if you're new to the CFL, is the Canadian ratio rules. So CFL teams have to start 7 of their 24 starters as Canadian players. So this means that the value of having a starting caliber Canadian player is super important, especially at positions that you wouldn't normally see. And so that brings in Cameron Judge of the Saskatchewan Roughriders, who's a linebacker, relatively unusual spot to see Canadians play in the CFL. And he also is just all-star caliber player with great coverage instincts. He brings a physical edge to the game, and he's also only 26. I just like the potential of Cameron Judge going forward. I have no idea whether he's going to sign immediately. He may linger on the free agent market for a while, reportedly because of trying to find an NFL opportunity, an NFL tryout this spring. But regardless, he's my second available free agent for this offseason. And similarly, my number 3 pick is Henoc Muamba of the Montreal Alouettes, who's also a linebacker. And the difference really between these two guys is that one, Muamba is a bit older. He's been in the league for a while, and he's the reigning most outstanding Canadian player in the CFL. He's just that good. He's a tackling machine. He has great closing speed. But what really sets Judge and Muamba apart for me is that I think from what I was watching when I reviewed all these CFL games from last season, Muamba wasn't as good in coverage, didn't disrupt the passing game as much as Judge did. And combined with the factor that, again, he's a little bit older than Judge, that's the only reason I would put Muamba behind Cameron Judge for this coming offseason. At number 4, and this would be most people's number 1, just based on how much we value quarterbacks, and that's Jeremiah Masoli. And I talked about Masoli a lot in a previous video, so check that out once you're done this one. So I won't go into too much detail about him personally, but he's a proven starter in the CFL. And the reason why I have him at number 4 and not say number 1 like the CFL.ca did is simply because I just don't think he has that much leverage in this particular offseason. I think there's only a couple teams, Toronto and Ottawa, along with Hamilton, that need his services. And though he's going to end up starting for one of those 3 teams, I guarantee it. Personally, he's not the guy I would want out of all the CFL quarterbacks in the league, but still a very good starter, and that's why he lands at number 4 on the list. At number 5 on the list, we have Almondo Sewell of the Edmonton football team, who's a defensive tackle. And Sewell has spent his entire 8-year career with Edmonton, where he's established himself as just a dominant defensive lineman, and he's kind of like our kind of Aaron Donald up here in Canada. There's so much that he does that doesn't show up on the stat sheet, though he does put up good statistics. This was actually one of the main reasons why I wanted to make this list. It's because that Sewell was ranked like 15th on CFL.ca's list, or 12th or something like that. And I just thought, wow, this guy, like, they just underestimate the value of this guy. This guy's the best defensive lineman in the CFL on a play-to-play basis. He just impacts the game. He attracts double teams. I'm just a huge fan of his game. I would take him over every defensive lineman in the league, even though he is a bit older. I don't think age is that much of an issue. We've seen that older players dominate this league year in and year out, and that's why I wouldn't be deterred by signing Almondo Sewell to be a key part of my defense in 2021, because I know he can be. And similarly, for my number 6 free agent, Charleston Hughes. And Charleston Hughes, there's not much you could say about him that hasn't already been said. He is the most dominant edge rusher in the entire CFL and has been for the last decade. For some reason, he just knows how to get to the quarterback. He's led the league in sacks for the last 3 seasons. Even at the age of, I think he's 37, he's just such an impactful player. And I wouldn't say, the reason why I have him below Sewell is mainly because Sewell is quite a bit younger still. I think he's like 3 or 4 years younger. But also the fact that on a play-to-play basis, I think that Sewell is just more of an impactful, higher motor player. Not saying that Charleston isn't. Charleston is honestly, obviously a Hall of Fame level CFL player. But that is just my take on the situation between those players, Sewell and Hughes. And then at number 7 is a guy that was only ranked a couple spots above my personal placement on the CFL.ca list, and that's wide receiver Greg Ellingson. And I love me some Greg Ellingson. Ellingson has had 5 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons, and now it looks like he's going to hit the free agent market and be highly coveted after not signing a deal with Edmonton, which was really surprising considering he's had a 5-year relationship with Trevor Harris, the quarterback for Edmonton. But regardless, he's going to be a big part of somebody's passing game in 2021. Just throwing a team out there, I think Ottawa would be a great fit, for example, if he goes back to Ottawa where he played for most of his career before spending just 1 season in Edmonton in 2019. I just love Ellingson's all-around game, and that's just what you want to see out of a CFL receiver in such a passing-heavy league. And the guy I have at number 8 is a guy I feel is often disrespected in CFL circles in terms of when we talk about the best receivers in the league. And that's Eric Rogers of the Calgary Stampeders. And when you look at Ellingson and Eric Rogers, and you compare these guys, from a statistical standpoint, Rogers and Ellingson are very, very similar. Rogers just comes up every year for the Stampeders, even though he plays for a great team. He's just always been there for that offense. He's always produced for the Stampeders. And I don't know why there's such a perception in the gap between those two players. To me, they're just the same guy, a number 1 receiver in the CFL, and I'm surprised that Calgary hasn't made it a priority to re-sign him. Maybe they have, they just haven't been able to get an agreement. But regardless, anybody that misses out on Ellingson, or anybody, I wouldn't fault anybody if they preferred Eric Rogers to Greg Ellingson. These guys are just so close in my mind, and I don't know why on the CFL.ca list that Ellingson was ranked number 5 and Rogers was ranked like 15th. Now moving on to number 9 is another guy that was ranked significantly lower on the CFL.ca list, and that was linebacker/cover linebacker Don Unumba. And Unumba, he brings a very special skill set to the table that if you haven't watched CFL football before, it's hard to kind of explain, because there's so much, the wider field in the CFL means that linebackers have a lot more coverage responsibilities, and Unumba is just one of the best all-around coverage linebackers you'll find in the CFL game. And a lot of this is just eye test stuff. This guy has just great athleticism. You can line him up one-on-one with a lot of guys. He can play a bit of halfback as well. He's just such a Swiss Army knife kind of player in a back 8 in the CFL. And he's just, I don't know why on the CFL.ca list that this guy was ranked like 18th. That role is just so important in the CFL game because of how defenses are getting picked apart in the middle of the field. You have to have linebackers that can cover in space, and there's not many guys that are capable of doing that, as well as providing some impact as a blitzer, as Unumba is. And then finally, my number 10 is a guy I couldn't leave off the list, but I really didn't know where to put him, is defensive lineman Micah Johnson. And Micah Johnson, he's the best interior pass rusher in the CFL when he's at his best. This guy, a couple of seasons ago in 2018 with Calgary, he put up 14 sacks as a defensive tackle in the CFL, which is just unheard of. And he regressed when he signed with Saskatchewan in 2019. He only put up 4 sacks. But I'm not a guy that believes that sacks are the end-all be-all of defensive line play. And you really have to watch the games, the play-to-play snaps. Are they getting pressure? Are they winning their matchup on a play-to-play basis? And Micah Johnson is still capable of doing that. He's very capable of doing that, especially in pass rush situations. He's kind of had a weird last couple of years because he's really one of the poster childs of this one-year contract dilemma, because even though he's one of the best players in the league, in 2018, so he spent a lot of time with Calgary, like 6 years with Calgary, and then he signs a one-year contract with Saskatchewan, and then after that, in 2020, of course, the season wasn't played, he signed a one-year deal with BC, but because they didn't freeze the contracts in the league, he ends up hitting the free agent market again, and it's going to be interesting to see if he's going to leave and go to another team, his third team, technically, in 3 years. And so, he's an interesting free agent, and I'm just really excited to see how he responds to kind of a down season in 2019. And as for guys that I just missed the cut on the list, Ed Gainey, defensive back for the Saskatchewan Roughriders, he has a 10 interception season under his belt in 2017. He is just a big playmaker on the back end for any team that's going to be willing to sign him. He's getting up there in age, which is not great for a defensive back. Usually that's one that depends on athleticism a lot. But like I said, older players in the CFL, it's kind of a haven for them. And then the next guy I had out was Shane Bergman, who I really wanted to find a spot for on the list, but this year's free agency group was just so stacked. He's a Canadian starting offensive lineman who, if he was a tackle, he probably would be on this top 10 list, but because he's a guard, the positional value, even though he may be the best guard in the entire league, he just misses the cut in this scenario for me. And then finally, Cordero Law of the Calgary Stampeders just misses the cut. He's a pure edge rusher, speed rusher. He doesn't have a lot of bulk. He's almost like a linebacker, smaller linebacker playing defensive end, but he's just a pure pass rusher, and he's going to get scooped up immediately by a CFL team if he wishes to sign a contract right away. But that's going to do it for today's video. I'd like to hear everybody's thoughts in the comment section below. Once again, my name is Jason. If you want to support the channel, the best way to do it is just by hitting that like button and subscribing to Hussey's Huddle for more CFL content just like this. Thanks again. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.